He didn't even look up when I walked in, just gestured at the chair like I was interrupting something. My badge was still clipped to my collar, still warm from the elevator ride. I sat, not because I respected him, but because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me stand when the blade came down. Victor smiled without his eyes. "We've reviewed your performance," he said, reading off a document like a student too bored to cheat properly, "and we've decided to part ways effective immediately." Then he flipped the letter across the desk like it was a restaurant bill and not the end of a career I'd rebuilt from ashes. No warning. No thank you. Just one more number cleared off his headcount spreadsheet. He leaned back, folded his arms. "No severance, no extension. And your options?" A snort. "Let's be honest, they're worthless anyway." I didn't flinch, even when my gut dropped. I just reached across the desk, picked up the paper, and glanced at the date. Wednesday, the 14th. My final vesting cliff was 2 days away. Friday. I stared at it for exactly 3 seconds, then stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out without a single word. Not because I was okay, but because I wasn't going to give him the ending he thought he was writing. And hey, before we go any further, if you've made it this far into the story, do me one tiny favor. Tap the like button. Hit subscribe. 97% of people listen without ever subscribing, but your support helps us keep these stories coming. All right, back to it. By the time I got to my desk, the office felt different. I could hear the vibrations of Slack messages bouncing off people's screens, whispers in the air, the kind that smell like blood. No one made eye contact. No one asked questions. Just the shuffle of keyboards and the occasional sip of coffee behind a monitor. I packed my things slow, deliberate, left the team photo tacked to the wall, left the fancy mouse I bought to make spreadsheet hell less miserable, left the Ectaris branded hoodie that always felt like it was begging to be cool but came out trying too hard. All of it stayed. The only thing I took was the folder I'd kept since onboarding, the one with my original offer letter, the 409A valuation chart, and the executive equity agreement they'd tried to bury in a blind DocuSign packet. I'd read every line of that thing when I joined. Twice. Then had my lawyer mark it up and resend. Clause 7.4b wasn't just a footnote, it was my parachute, just in case. I didn't email HR, didn't cry in the stairwell like I did the last time life kicked me in the ribs. I forwarded the termination letter to one person, Sarah Cho, Senior Compliance Officer in Finance, and added just one line above the thread. Confirm effective date for audit compliance. That was it. I knew she'd be at lunch, maybe even in a budget review, but Sarah reads everything, especially things with my name on them. And she knew exactly what Wednesday meant. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. It was a text from Sarah. Just 3 words. "Is this serious?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because if she was texting me like that, she was already rereading the clause. She was already calling legal. She was already realizing that firing me without cause, without 72-hour written notice, wasn't just a cold-blooded move. It was a $3.2 million mistake. And by the time Victor realized it, I wouldn't just be a disgruntled ex-employee, I'd be a fully vested shareholder with every right to ride the wave I helped build. He thought he was cutting dead weight. He had no idea he'd just signed off on 1.8% of his company, hand-delivered to the woman he just kicked out 2 days too early. A year ago, I sat across from Victor at a coffee shop that reeked of burnt espresso and ambition. He slid me the offer across the sticky tabletop like he was doing me a favor. I still remember the smirk he wore when he said, "We can't match your last salary, but think long-term. Equity upside. Rocket ship trajectory." I took the deal anyway, walked away from a steady paycheck, a corner office, and a bonus I'd already earned, all to join a company still duct taping its back end together with post-its and prayer, because I believed in the problem, because I knew I could build the engine that made international shipping behave like a domestic run. One algorithm, one uptime dashboard, one lean pipeline at a time. The export logic engine wasn't a product when I came in. It was a pitch deck fantasy and a mood board of APIs no one had touched since 2014. What they had was a name. What I had was 23 integrations to write, 7 legacy systems to bridge, and 1 shot to make it all work before the end of Q4. And I did. Quietly. While sales took credit, while marketing drew diagrams of features they didn't understand, while Victor put his name on every earnings call slide like he'd typed a single line of code. I pushed through the 3 a.m. alerts, the vendor outages, the data ingestion pipeline failures, the offshore team rewrites, the CFO trying to optimize headcount by pulling junior devs mid-sprint. The final vesting tranche was tied to two things: 100% uptime across primary nodes for the last month of Q4 and successful client-side integration before the December 31st deadline. I hit both, not just barely. I crushed them. We were green across every metric before Christmas. Clients were live, revenue was flowing, and everyone in leadership knew it, including Victor. So when he fired me 2 days before that last tranche locked in, don't think it was some accident. It wasn't panic. It wasn't oversight. It was math. He ran the numbers and decided I was too expensive to keep around for another 48 hours. That 1.8% of equity, that scared him more than losing the person who built the very engine they were now calling their $250 million runway. But here's the part he didn't factor in, the fine print. Clause 7.4b. Accelerated vesting if terminated without cause, triggered immediately if written notice wasn't provided 72 hours in advance. And as much as Victor loved power plays, he hated documentation. No notice. Just a smirk and a printed PDF on a Wednesday morning. I wonder if he even knew what 1.8% actually meant in dollar terms now. At the current valuation, north of $3 million, all for the cost of a 3-minute email he didn't bother to send. He thought he'd cut a cost center. He forgot I was the cost calculator. The truth is, I didn't just build the export logic engine. I built the thing that kept Actaris from being just another cargo data startup with a catchy name and no traction. I was the quiet reason investors didn't bail, the reason enterprise clients didn't churn after the second deployment failed in Q2. I made the machine run, then made it bulletproof. And he thought he could just cut me out of the picture like a headcount line on a budget spreadsheet? Victor wasn't dumb, just arrogant. And arrogance blinds you to the hands that hold the fuse, especially when you're standing next to the powder keg. So no, his little move wasn't a mistake. It was a calculation. But what he miscalculated was me. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't storm out or write some long-winded LinkedIn monologue about growth and gratitude and new beginnings. I didn't even send a goodbye email. I just walked back to my desk like someone going to the DMV, annoyed, exhausted, but already thinking 3 steps ahead. The thing about being quietly underestimated for most of your life is that you get really good at hiding your plans. And I'd made plenty, just in case. I had a folder in my inbox tagged, "If it happens," a copy of my equity agreement signed and countersigned, a time-stamped PDF of the clause they never redlined, and a draft email already half-written, waiting only for the day someone like Victor thought I'd go quietly. I didn't waste a word. I opened the termination letter, attached it to a new message, and typed Sarah Cho's email into the to field. Not HR, not legal, not my manager, who hadn't even shown his face since I got back from the walk of shame. Sarah. She was quiet like me. Numbers first, no fluff, just the metrics, Sarah. She'd once flagged a rounding error in a vesting schedule that saved the company over $80K before it became a lawsuit. She didn't gossip, didn't speculate. She just checked the numbers. And she knew the difference between voluntary and without cause. I typed one line above the attached letter, confirm effective date for compliance. That's all I wrote. No accusations, no dramatics, no exclamation points or all caps revenge, just a paper trail, a quiet little match waiting for friction. I hit send and turned back to my desk, cleaned out a drawer, tossed expired ID cards and those sad granola bars that always tasted like drywall. Dropped my signed whiteboard sketches into the bin. That was the part that got me, if I'm honest, erasing those marker strokes I'd stayed late to finish. The logic flow that saved us from a rollback in October. Gone. Like I was never there. 20 minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Her text just said, "Is this serious?" That was it. No emojis, no platitudes. But I knew her well enough to hear the alarm behind those 3 words. Because if she was texting instead of emailing, she was in a panic. She'd already pulled the file, already found the clause, already realized what Victor hadn't. that Clause 7.4b wasn't just boilerplate legalese, it was a tripwire, no notice period, no cause provided. And the exact language said, in such event, all remaining unvested equity shall immediately accelerate, effective as of termination. Sarah knew the cap table better than anyone. She'd modeled every what-if scenario for board review. And she damn well knew what 1.8% meant at our current valuation, especially when it was suddenly tagged as fully vested and exercised. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because if Sarah was in motion, so was finance. And once finance gets legal involved, especially over a term like immediate acceleration, there's no clawing that back. It was too clean, too fast, too clearly documented. Victor probably thought he'd cut a quiet check off the payroll and moved on. Instead, he'd just triggered a chain reaction, one that turned his little power play into a compliance firestorm, one that gave me exactly what he was trying to steal. No threats, no tantrums, just a forward, just a timestamp, just the right person reading the right line at the wrong time for him. An hour later, the system did what I designed it to do. It started with the calendar sync. Every Friday at 3 p.m., our internal compliance bot flagged upcoming vesting events and cross-checked them against employee status. Normally, it was boring, just a trickle of names, most with sub-threshold grants or no activity at all. But that Friday, my name would have pinged red. Except now it wasn't pending. Because an hour after I sent the email, Finance, God bless their spreadsheets and 3-sentence limit, sent Victor exactly what he'd earned. Termination without cause, before expiration, immediate acceleration per clause 7.4b. 72-hour notice not provided. 2 lines. That's all it took to break the illusion of control he thought he had. Because for people like Victor, control only matters when it's visible. The optics, the corner office, the walkout, the smug little ceremony of power. But clauses work in silence. They don't need applause. 10 minutes later, legal replied all. Subject: executive equity grant triggered. No fluff, no wiggle room, just the stamp of finality from a department that lives and dies by precision. I wasn't unemployed anymore. I was vested. Every share, every quarter. Retroactive, immediate, irrevocable. In a blink, I went from former employee to registered shareholder, on the books, in the cap table, and with full voting rights for every major decision going forward. I wasn't outside the building looking in anymore. I was inside the numbers, inside the structure, and there wasn't a damn thing Victor could do about it. He couldn't rescind the grant. It was tied to performance, and performance had been met. He couldn't revise the exit classification. It had already been logged. Sarah's timestamp. My email, his letter. The system had moved faster than he ever anticipated. That's the thing about people like Victor. They mistake silence for absence. They think if you don't fight back in real time, you're powerless. They think if you walk away, they've won. But I'd never walked away. I'd just walked through a different door, one with better leverage, because the moment legal locked in my equity grant, the board would see it too. Every quarterly report, every stockholder meeting, every diluted round. My name would be there, etched into the math he couldn't change. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. I had a clause, a clean trigger, a quiet transition, no signatures required beyond his own. Victor thought he could outmaneuver me with surprise, but I'd built the architecture. I knew how fast the system moved. And once it processed my change in status, it didn't ask questions. It just obeyed its own rules, ones he'd never bothered to read. No legal fight, no drama, just one email, just one clause, just one mistake. His. My phone rang once, then again, same number, same nerve-wracked timing. I didn't pick up. I didn't even pretend to consider it. The third time, the voicemail kicked in, and his voice came through flat and rehearsed, like someone trying to squeeze empathy out of a tone-deaf script. Hey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let's talk. The audio bounced like it was playing on speaker, which meant he wasn't alone. I pictured him pacing in that sterile corner office, legal on one side, Sarah refusing to make eye contact on the other, everyone silently calculating how fast this thing had unraveled. I blocked the number. Then I opened Carta. My profile loaded in seconds, and there it was. Every line item checked green. Status, fully vested. Options, exercisable. Timeline accelerated per clause 7.4b. There was a formality to it that made me laugh. The irony of a system so cold and robotic doing more for my career in 5 minutes than Victor ever had. I downloaded the cap table like it was a souvenir. PDF format, timestamped. Filed under a new folder on my personal drive. Actaris Fallout. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Not really. I felt clean, like a door had finally shut without slamming. No noise, just the soft click of something locking behind me that no one could reopen without keys they didn't know existed. Then I pulled up a different tab, one that had been sitting in the background for months. Half-built slides, prototype mock-ups, architecture sketches from long nights when I couldn't sleep, and the Actaris roadmap felt too brittle to trust. TerraSpan Systems. It wasn't just an idea. Not anymore. I opened the pitch deck and kept working like I hadn't just been fired. Because technically, I hadn't. I'd just changed status. Employee to founder, contributor to owner. Someone else's platform to mine. Victor thought he could unwrite me with a letter. But I was already coding something he didn't even know he'd lose. And the funny part? All it would have taken to avoid this was 72 hours of basic foresight. 3 days of patience, but ego's a fast operator, and arrogance makes terrible math decisions. So he fired me on Wednesday, and by Thursday, I was back to work. Not for him. For something better. For something mine. The headline hit late Friday, right as the markets closed. Just enough time to simmer all weekend. Lead engineer exits Actaris 2 days before platform relaunch. No quotes. No source, just facts and timing dropped like a stone into a still pond. The kind of line that doesn't need commentary, because the silence around it is what makes it loud. Monday morning, Actaris stock opened soft, not catastrophic, not yet. But the usual chatter on investor threads had changed tone. The optimism felt thinner, like everyone suddenly realized they'd missed something. Then the second ripple hit. I hadn't posted anything. No press release, no victory lap, just opened LinkedIn, changed my headline to 5 words. Founder, TerraSpan Systems. Cincinnati, OH, no photo, no banner. Just that one line. And it was enough. People noticed, especially the ones who'd been watching Actaris from the sidelines, waiting to see if the export logic platform really had legs. They'd heard the buzz. They'd seen the Q4 numbers. But now, the name behind the actual code, the one they'd been told was core to our technical roadmap, was suddenly gone. And not just gone, but building something new. Messages started pinging, friends in product, a few quiet VPs from clients we'd onboarded together, even one senior architect from a rival logistics startup I demoed to back in August. No one asked why I left. They asked one thing. Is it true? Because by Tuesday, the investor calls had begun. Not to me, yet. To the board, to their analysts, to their own technical due diligence teams. The question kept coming. Wasn't she the architect? No one had a clean answer, because if they admitted yes, it begged the next question. Then why fire her 2 days before the biggest product release in your history? And if they said no, well, that would be a lie, and anyone who'd ever seen a cap table or a demo walkthrough knew it. Victor stayed quiet. Smart move, for once, because any statement at that point would have just fanned the flames. The board hadn't prepped talking points. PR hadn't even known I'd been terminated. It was a hole in their narrative that couldn't be patched because it wasn't just a person missing. It was the credibility beneath their entire roadmap. Actaris tried to spin it as a natural transition. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. My silence was louder than their pivot. And while they scrambled to contain the narrative, TerraSpan's inbox quietly filled. 3 investor intros, 2 partnership inquiries, 1 very familiar client asking, "Any chance we can beta test?" All that from 5 quiet words on a LinkedIn profile. Victor fired a name. What he didn't realize was he'd just created a signal, and the market had started listening. The first move wasn't loud. It never is. I didn't tweet, didn't write a Medium post called Why I Left. I just filed paperwork. Continuation patents, 6 of them. All legally distinct, but rooted in the same architecture I'd spent 18 months perfecting under Actaris. The legal line was razor thin, but clean. They'd failed to lock exclusivity on derivative development. a clause I'd pushed for during contract negotiations, buried in a section no one but me and my attorney cared about. So I kept the bones, stripped the branding, rebuilt the interface, removed all the bloated middleware, and replaced it with something that actually respected latency and cross-border routing. It was faster, leaner, clearer. TerraSpan wasn't just a rebrand, it was a refinement. And the best part? They couldn't claim it, because they didn't even know what parts of the system I'd coded myself, what sat in my brain versus what was committed to their repo. They let me build unchecked. Now they were chasing shadows. Meanwhile, I was already in motion. 3 early clients reached out within days of the headline. Quiet ones, the type who hate buzzwords and love results. I'd worked with them personally, helped onboard their data layers when the offshore team kept breaking things at 2 a.m. We'd built trust, not through sales decks, but through bug fixes and 4-hour screen shares where I solved problems no one else could explain. Each message read almost the same. Are you building again? Followed quickly by, can we see a demo? I didn't oversell, just replied, beta in 2 weeks. No roadmap PDFs, no pitch deck attachments, just trust. One of them, an operations director at a freight analytics firm, followed up with, honestly, if it's half as stable as your last build, we're in. No RFP needed. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to convince anyone. They already knew what I could do. I wasn't a pitch anymore. I was proof, and proof doesn't need a logo. While Actaris scrambled to schedule press briefings and wrangle what remained of their API stability, I sat in a co-working space across town eating bad vending machine pretzels, reviewing pull requests from 2 devs I'd handpicked from my network. No job listings, no org chart, just people who knew how to build without drama. We pushed our first live route simulation 4 days later, logged data flow in under 200 numbers end to end. No infrastructure budget, no layers of VP review, just clean logic, humming like it was finally free to run. Every night, I exported system logs into encrypted archives, backed up 3 ways, each tagged with hash verifications. Not because I was paranoid, because I'd seen what happens when you leave your work in someone else's hands and assume they'll protect it. I wasn't making that mistake again. By the end of week 2, we had a working prototype, a signed demo agreement, and a soft, if this works, we'll migrate from a 7-figure account. No launch, no noise, just traction. They thought they'd buried me with paperwork. All I did was file more of my own. The ballroom lights were dimmed just enough to hide nerves, not enough to soften egos. Global Trade Systems Forum. Vegas, of course, where every booth is a competition and every panel is a thinly veiled flex. Actaris had secured prime placement months in advance. Custom signage, coordinated outfits, smiles rehearsed to the syllable. Victor stood dead center in the press photo lineup, grinning like a man who still thought he had the story under control. But the cracks were already showing. 2 of their anchor clients had quietly pulled out of sponsorships. One had canceled a renewal. Another had gone dark after requesting technical revalidation that everyone knew was just code for, we're not sure your architect didn't just walk out with the future. The opening panel was titled Streamlining Export Intelligence in the Post-AI Trade Era. Dramatic, bloated, and perfectly tailored for someone like Victor, who lived for buzzwords that sounded like they meant something. His name was listed 3rd, right under Chief Strategy Officer Actaris. He took the stage in a custom blazer and a face that didn't know how to register doubt. I didn't take a seat in the audience. I didn't linger near the back wall hoping for dramatic effect. No. I walked in through the side door at exactly 9:56 a.m., 4 minutes before the panel started. My badge caught the scanner's light. Elaine Foster, founder, TerraSpan Systems, panelist. I felt his gaze hit me like a slap of static. He froze just long enough to look human, just long enough to realize someone had moved a piece on the board he didn't know existed. My panel chair had a placard, my company name below it, and in smaller print, sponsored by CrossPoint Freight, Helios Routes, and Kessler Analytics. 3 clients, all recent defections, all wearing the same kind of quiet expression, one that said, we know what you built, and we followed it. Victor's jaw tightened, but the press had their cameras out. He smiled, not convincingly, but close enough for headlines. One of the VCs beside him, a quiet face I remembered from a boardroom slide call last fall, leaned in just slightly and muttered loud enough for only two people to hear. Rough timing. The moderator started reading bios. My name last. No fanfare, just the facts. Elaine Foster, founder, TerraSpan Systems. Previously led development of the export optimization platform currently in use by several enterprise-scale freight networks. Her work focuses on systems efficiency, IP continuity, and adaptive trade routing. Victor blinked twice. That phrase, currently in use, probably felt like a dagger, because the platform he brought to market wasn't mine anymore. What I'd built, the core logic, the speed, the integrations, that wasn't what Actaris was presenting. They were presenting an echo, a version stalled out in last year's architecture. While TerraSpan, we were already on 3.2, and our clients knew it. The panel started. Questions flew. I answered when asked, briefly, cleanly, no shots fired. But I didn't need to land punches. My presence was the punch. 3 companies had bet on me and showed it publicly. No press release, no fuss. Just a logo behind my name and a nod of endorsement in full view of every potential partner in that room. And Victor? He had to sit there and smile like the king of a throne no one was defending anymore. By the end of the session, 2 more companies had followed me into the hallway. No handshakes for Actaris, just sidelong glances. Victor stayed behind, sipping water, trapped in a circle of media handlers trying to pivot the story. But the story had already changed, and he wasn't writing it anymore. It came in the middle of a quiet Tuesday, the kind of afternoon where nothing dramatic ever really happens until it does. I was reviewing rollout timelines for TerraSpan's latest integration partner when the email landed. Not from a recruiter, not from a reporter, not from a client. From Jenna, an old friend from finance. Subject line, "You didn't get this from me." The body, just a screenshot. Cropped, time-stamped, but unmistakably internal. Victor's name, a board chain. Full context. Can we claw back the options or reclassify the exit as cause? There it was. His Hail Mary, weeks after the panel, after the headlines, after the silent exodus of 2 more enterprise accounts. He was still trying to erase the decision that started it all, pretending it was a technicality, that maybe if he twisted the story hard enough, they could pretend I hadn't walked out the door with 1.8% of his cap table. The reply from legal was short. Surgical. No, they're hers. Clause 7.4b applies. Classification, non-cause, no further action recommended. No further action. That's the language of corporate defeat. It doesn't shout. It signs the death certificate and walks away. I stared at the screen for a moment. Not out of shock. Out of completion. I forwarded the screenshot to Sarah. No greeting, no context, just 4 words. Still think they're worthless? No reply needed. We both knew what that clause had meant all along, what Victor had failed to read, what Sarah had flagged the moment she saw the letter, what I had built as a quiet fallback and he'd tried to treat like trash. The irony hung in the air like smoke. He'd fired me to avoid dilution. 2 days early. Thought he was clever, efficient, strategic. And now? Now I was locked into the shareholder ledger, with protections he couldn't touch and visibility he couldn't erase. I didn't need a title. Didn't need to sit in his meetings or whisper in hallways. I just needed the numbers, the percentage, the paper, and I had it. Meanwhile, Actaris limped into Q2 with a patched platform and a nervous board. The export logic engine, in its orphaned form, had begun to break under its own weight. Support tickets climbed. Integration time slipped. Customers whispered. TerraSpan, on the other hand, had just closed its seed round. 7 clients. 1 clean beta. 3 enterprise pilots, and a single founder who knew exactly what mistake not to make. Funny thing is, 2 more days wouldn't have cost Victor a dime. Not in severance, not in bonuses, not in PR, just patience. But arrogance doesn't like to wait. It likes to win fast, loud, and visibly. And in doing so, it handed me everything it thought it was taking away. I own 1.8% of Actaris now, not because I fought for it, but because Victor tried to steal it. Too early, too carelessly, and without reading the one clause written in plain English. Now? Now I watch from the sidelines while he tries to explain why the architect of his platform is also the owner of the equity he swore was worthless. Turns out the only thing worthless was his timing.